Welcome back to the arena. This is Squider Dragon. First off, an apology for the end of the video for episode 1. Got cut short, just an editing issue, but the main content was there, so hope you enjoyed this. In the last episode, we saw that we got to the point in time where we unlocked the 5 decks. In this next episode, we're going to realise that although we have the decks unlocked, in terms of playing them, what we really need to do is to play through these colour challenges. So each deck has its own colour challenge, and similar to the first video, it's similar in a way that we play against different coloured decks, against the deck that we choose. What I'm going to do in this episode is start with our mono white. This is a deck we've been used to because we used that in the initial tutorial and the defeat of Nicol Bolas. So let's stick with what we know. We'll take that deck and we'll play the colour challenge with this deck. Now, in this video series, you'll see we play against different decks, and in one particular match, as we'll get to, you'll see that I was defeated a number of times. So it gives you a good indication. This is exactly how I played through them. In some cases, I got through the colour challenge quest fairly quickly. In other cases, in one particular case, you see I had to keep a number of attempts. So it'll give you an understanding of what went wrong the first time and how I tried to change strategy. The other thing is, when we get to the end of the video, you'll see that we earned a pack. We'll come on to that, and we earned it through experience. So I'll explain from a free-to-play point of view the two main ways of earning packs, which for new cards is either through the experience track or from the gold track. And at the end of the video, we have enough gold to buy a pack, but I'm going to leave that purchase and that process and some of the discussions around what we might buy and what we might open and how that looks. And at the end of the video, we also discuss the wild cards, because that's pointed out by the tutorial. So here we go with the colour challenge. You can see the decks all appeared locked, and we get a message saying we need to play at least one deck, so we get into do the colour challenge. You can see here as well we get 250 gold and an unlock of a new mode, which is PvP, which is player versus player. So not only are we doing the quest to unlock some cards, we're locking new modes of play. So we'll get into this and go through this colour challenge with the white deck. You see the reference there briefly to the reward track, and you can see the reward track says we're currently level 1, we've just started. When we get to level 2, or we level up to level 2, we will receive a free pack of Strixhaven, and that's what we achieve in this video, and we will do the opening of that pack and we'll see what we get. But as I said, we also earn gold, but I will leave the purchase of the pack until the episode after this one. So let's get back to this episode 2 and our first colour challenge with white. So here we see the 5 decks. We've got the options of what colour challenge we want to run, the different colours of magic, as we've seen in the first episode. So I'm choosing, because we're used to this from the last episode, our white deck, so at least we're familiar with it. So I start with the white deck. I'm having a look at the deck just so as we are aware of what cards we have that we're playing with. This is a bit of a refresher from the first episode. So you can see some additional cards that we didn't play but might be available to us. And like the last episode, I've said quite an important thing to spend time to read the cards and understand what they're doing, what the abilities are, In particular, pay attention to the power toughness, if it's a creature, and any special abilities it might have, like flying, or, as I mentioned, these enter the battlefield effects. And then, again, get used to the fact that you're looking at the different types of spell, instants, sorceries, and when they can be cast. And we'll see that when we go through this white colour challenge. So as I said, I'll start with white because we're familiar with that, and then we will go on in the next few episodes to do each of these colour challenges in turn. And what that does is it just gives us more access to cards, and we will have full access to the 5 starting decks, and that's going to be important for going forward in our free-to-play experience. The more access to cards and decks that we have, the more flexibility we have, we can react to or address the challenges as and when they come up, and I'll get into that, what I mean by that. We can get into that as the series progresses. So we can see here, as we saw before, if we have a win, we get a deck upgrade, we add new cards that are useful. So as you add more and more cards, I will talk about what cards contain and what changes you might want to make, and that will also be true when we come to open other packs of cards and have cards that might be suitable for certain decks. So we start this white colour challenge in a similar way. Before, we're now facing a red mage, and in fact, as you can see, the Planeswalker Chandra Nalaar, who's a red Planeswalker, is supposedly our opponent. So the idea in this colour challenge is we are playing against Chandra Nalaar. It's interesting, I think, we play against these pseudo opponents, in-game characters, but when we come to the last challenge, not necessarily a boss match, but the last challenge of this colour challenge, we actually face our first real match against another player, but we'll come to that when the time comes, and I'll talk about that when we get to the video. For the meantime, we're just going through, we're using a similar strategy. Red is playing some fast creatures, so I am using my own creatures to block. We now know or recognize that when we have a bigger creature across the board, attacking isn't profitable, so I hold the Impassioned Orator back. The Impassioned Orator is a nice ETB effect that when I cast a creature spell, I gain life. So, and that triggers for each individual copy. So as I have 2 Orators out, I get what's called 2 triggers. We saw as well with the Hallowed Priest, the advantage of the Hallowed Priest, its ability is if we gain life, which we do with the Impassioned Orator, the priest gains power and toughness. So it's a nice combination to be able to rely on these 2 effects, the life gain and the fact that the Hallowed Priest gets bigger each time we cast a new spell. So again, with the 3/3 I didn't attack. Again, in this case being patient, so what I'm doing is relying on the fact that I know I have another priest coming out, and as you can see, both priests get pumped up because of the benefit of the life gain from the Impassioned Orators. I now have a much bigger 5/5, so I can attack in, bring in the Chandra Nalaar Planeswalker character down to 15. She casts a bigger spell. We've seen the Volcanic Dragon before that Nicol Bolas used, but she's a red mage and she has access to the red spells. I cast out the Inspiring Commander. The Inspiring Commander is useful. It's giving us 2 effects here. One is, because it's a creature, I've got the ETB effects, which is pumping our creatures up, but it's also able, when we cast creatures, it gives us card draw, that card advantage that I talked about. So this is a nice combination we have going because our Hallowed Priests are getting bigger. We're going to obviously leave the Impassioned Orators back because they're giving us this enter the battlefield effect, unless the opponent has a way of dealing with direct damage to it directly with a spell. And as you can see, we've already got this match very much underhand, and a lot of that's come down to the fact that we're relying on the synergy of the cards between the Impassioned Orator granting life gain as creatures enter the battlefield to these priests. The priests get bigger the more that we gain life, and that allows us big enough creatures to be able to swing in and finish this match off quite comfortably. So a nice first easy win that gives you an idea, and you can see the nonsense, if that's the word for it, that goes on, because each time I cast a creature I get the life gain triggers, the priests get bigger, and so it goes on. So again, although it's overkill at this point in time, just to show you the effect, the more creatures I add, these things that are going off that might take a bit of time to play through are called triggers. So what that's meaning, I'm triggering the ability, which is just drawing me more cards in this case, and also when I cast a creature, I'm getting the life gain triggers from the Impassioned Orator. So we now have quite an insane board. Again, I continue the process of casting out. Again, at this point, it's overkill, but I just wanted to do this to show you the sort of real over-the-top powerful effect. You often heard the decks called OP, that's overpowered, or just insanely powerful. We were lucky with the cards that we had and the synergy that's been built into this white deck, and that's something that we'll explore. We'll get used to the synergies that the other colour decks that we'll be playing in the colour challenges have, because they're each different. Each colour of Magic has its own unique. White, as we've seen from this deck, normally focuses on life gain as what's called a win condition. It's one of the main mechanisms, and you see that the deck that we have and the new cards that we add to the deck has a theme of life gain, which is typically very much the point or a feature of the white Magic with planes. Other decks have life gain as well, but life gain in this particular case, as we've seen, is quite a feature of this particular deck build. And really what white is Magic, one of its strengths is its ability to have a lot of spells and creatures that give us extra life, that keeps us alive long enough to defeat the opponent. So first defeated, we go on to now face a black mage in the Planeswalker Liliana Vess, who uses black magic. And again, you can see here black has its own unique characteristics. One of the things that black does well with a lot of its cards is this ability called Death Touch. A Death Touch is irrespective of how small the creature is, and it's a lowly 1/1 that as long as it deals at least 1 point of damage to a creature, irrespective of how big the creature is, that creature dies. So it's a very powerful effect. This black deck's based on the fact of trying to have synergy between creatures dying and growing this creature in a similar way we saw with the priest, just a different mechanic, but this relies on creatures dying to grow the Malachor Cullblade into a bigger creature. We're not going to give the opponent the opportunity for that, again, because here I'm attacking, and of course what was surprising there, the opponent didn't block. So now it's attacking. I'm not going to block because I'll just lose the Orator. And we have two creatures. The Malachor Cullblade himself does not have Death Touch, it's only a 1/1. So it made sense to hold back. As long as he attacks with a rat, it's blocked. Remember, it's tapped, beg your pardon. So it is not able to block, so it can't kill anything because he's chosen to attack. Again, this is the feature of the AI. A typical player might have held the Typhoid Rat back because as we can see, our creatures, the priest, in the same as we saw with the last match, is getting bigger because of the life gain coming from the onboard effect from the Orators. So again, we're only facing a 1/1. Now the Typhoid Rat's untapped. But again, our opponent continues to attack with it. He now has a Sengir Vampire that's got flying, so we can't block the Sengir Vampire. But if we look at our hands, we see we've got cards too that we can use to deal with it. So we have the ability to give flying, but we also have this tactical advantage, which we've seen. So again, as I said, Magic's about decisions. What decisions do we make? So in this case, I have the similar situation because the Death Touch is not a problem because you attack with it, it's tapped. The Impassioned Orators, of course, if they attack, would get killed by the Sengir Vampire because it's bigger. But what I do is I stand to put the opponent now, he's obviously blocking the bigger creature, so my 2/2s, although I attack with them, weren't at risk. He's blocked the bigger creature, but of course that works for us because we can use tactical advantage to remove the threat. So again, taking those decisions about what cards to play when. Again, we see this continues to build. We now understand from the first match that we had using this deck and what we saw in the previous episode about these life gain become quite powerful to grow the creature. And again, we're facing a second match which is very one-sided in this colour challenge. We already have the opponent on 1 life and we've got plenty of creatures. You see the opponent, his deck continues to put out, he attacks with the rat hoping that we'll block, but we don't. And we're just drawing into more and more creatures and more powerful spells. In this case we have Angelic Reward, which obviously gives a creature flying. But of course he does have a flyer in the Sengir Vampire that could be used to block. But still, he's only on 1 life. So we only need to do 1 more point of damage with all these creatures we have in hand. And he only effectively has 2 blockers. So if this point in time we did nothing and attack with everything, we'd still win. But what I wanted to do here was just, we have the mana, we have the spells, so we're just going to use that mana prior to combat. Don't forget as well, there's a sequence of play with a sequence, so you can cast spells, but when you go into combat, it might be too late unless you're casting an instant spell, something like that we saw with Take Advantage. So we'll get used to the fact if you want to cast spells, sometimes you might be recommended to cast a spell before you go into the combat step, and therefore the ability that you've had from the spell is already available for a creature that's attacking, which is what we have in this case. Again, the game is already won at this point, but we've cast a spell. We could have made an alternative decision to cast the Leon and War Leader. It's a good blocker, and when it attacks, it creates a 1/1 life gain tokens. So we saw we got a block there. So again, even playing against the AI, it knows it has to block. But now, of course, we have the War Leader out. Cast a second, we've still got the tactical advantage. Here we can see he's held the Typhoid Rats back. So we do lose the Priest. But we were dealing more than enough damage to finish this particular match. So we move on to the next deck. So again, we get a deck upgrade. We get 2 new Shrine Creepers to be added to the deck, and we've got, so we can look at the deck, these cards get added, showing you what the reward is from these colour challenges. That's why I'm saying I'm recommending that before we get any further with our free to play journey, we run through all the colour challenges and log all the resources available to us in terms of the decks that we're playing. And as I said, we're using our experience and knowledge that we already have in playing this white deck when we move on to other episodes and we start to play other colour decks, there'll be things to learn, and I'll point those out as we go through those particular colour challenges. But at least we're seeing matches against other colour decks that we saw before when we did the very first episode, when we were going through all the different tutorial lessons showing us how to play the game, what the creature effects were, how damage works. So we're already familiar with how this works, but we're seeing different cards. This is a new ability that this card contains, which is worth talking about, which is called First Strike. So you can spend mana into this creature, meaning that you're using some of that spare mana you have to give this creature what's called First Strike. So a First Strike creature means that it will deal damage. So if it's got a sufficient power when it attacks, it will do sufficient damage to kill the creature that maybe blocking it. So you'll see here I use this ability. I've got the tactical advantage, which I'm using in this case, but we'll come on and show using the First Strike ability that's built into the specific card. So again, First Strike ability tends to be, it's associated with a lot of colours of Magic, but you get a lot of creatures with white that have First Strike, like Knights for example, and that just means they're more effective at attacking because they can deal their damage before a creature has a chance to effectively defend and attack back. So what I want to do now, I'm facing this 4/4. I know I've got the tactical advantage. 2 power isn't enough in this creature necessarily but what we're going to try and do is rely on the fact that we have this First Strike ability built into the Inquisitor just by pumping mana into it. So you can see if I pump into it, it gains this First Strike ability until the end of turn. So I'm just trying to calculate how I want to treat this 4/4 threat. Okay, so like we saw with the previous episode in particular, where we have the blue spell, he's now casting out these 4/4 flyers, and we know that even with our First Strike ability, even if we could take one of these out, which I think is what I try and do here. This is a match that I had the difficulty with, and you'll see I tried different strategies to get through this particular challenge. The challenge in particular being that he keeps on putting out these flying creatures that we can't necessarily defend with ground creatures, so we need to counterattack and find a way of counterattacking and being able, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm counterattacking with both because you can only block one, and I'm using the fact that I've got a tactical advantage. Of course, both creatures die, but what I was trying to do at this point in time is just do the attack to force the creature block, which came, so that I could use my tactical removal to get rid of one of them. So we're still facing this 4/4 threat, and you'll find this in Magic. Sometimes you'll face a bigger threat that you don't have what's called an answer for. That means a spell that can deal with it. And again, as this particular colour quest with blue, so again, one of the main features of the colour blue, and we've seen this before, is blue tends to feature a lot of flying creatures that are in the air. The other important ability that's strongly associated with blue is card draw, so they tend to have more spells that are involved drawing cards. And remember, we talked about card draw being advantage. The more cards you have over your opponent, the more likely you have the right answers to be able to win the match. So we're still navigating with our white deck, We know we have the 3/3 Ceratops, which gives us life gain when it attacks, which is useful in this particular matchup. Here we can see the spell Winged Words, which is drawing cards. As I said, very much a feature of blue mana in Magic the Gathering is the ability to have spells that draw a lot of cards, and we should now recognise why that's important. Drawing cards gives you more cards to play and potentially the right answers. That goes in conjunction, I'll mention though, it's okay having card draw to play, but we must also have the mana to cast those spells. So we also need to pay attention to the fact that when we are looking at our decks and what cards the decks contain, that the decks contain enough land cards which provide the mana to cast the spells. So if we have no mana to cast the spells, irrespective of how good the spells are, a lack of mana means that we will not be winning the game. So there's a lot of things to consider, but hopefully these tutorials and these colour challenges that we'll walk through, I'll give you pointers from my perspective of things that might not be immediately obvious for you as a new player. And this is all designed to get you ready for being in a position to, so you can see I take the aggressive approach, and you can see I'm using the life gain ability to try and keep my life up, although it's dangerously low at 6. So in this point in time, there's really not much I can do. Holding back didn't make sense because, as mentioned, and as you can see, these creatures are flying, so my own creatures staying in the ground not doing anything doesn't make sense. So we have a problem to solve with this particular challenge facing this particular deck. Is we know we have access to at least one spell that gives us a creature that flies, but that's only one spell of the many we have. The majority of the spells that we have are creatures that are ground, we term ground creatures. They're not flying, and therefore they're not able to do any blocking to combat this threat. So as I said, I keep on playing through this just to come up with a different strategy. So this is what you'll find with Magic, particularly when you're doing these quests. You'll find that you'll evolve your own strategy once you learn about how the game is playing, what's happening, what cards are being played, what's your best answer. It's coming up with your own strategy, and that's just something you, with play experience, the more games you play, the more decks you'll face against, the more you get used to the cards, you'll get used to what card works best in a different situation, and that's important when it comes to obviously building decks in the first place, which we'll come on to much later. But for now, we just want to get used to the mechanics of playing the cards and how we handle the challenge of beating a deck that has a lot of flyers that currently we know the spells that we have access to don't necessarily help us to defeat. We know we have to have this first strike ability with the creatures. You'll see what I do here is an attack. In this, my strategy at this point in time is to use a tactical advantage. As you'll find out, that particular strategy didn't work necessarily well. It took care of this initial threat, but we know we're going to be facing, and here's the first of them, we're going to be facing these 4/4 flyers. So the real question is, what do we do and how do we deal with or handle the fact that the opponent has these 4/4 flying creatures that we need to have a way of dealing with. So you'll see eventually I come up with the right strategy, but I'm playing through different approaches. What I haven't really done to now, which is part of the secret of getting this particular challenge, I wasn't really relying too much on the fact that I have these Moorland Inquisitors that have this first strike ability. So I start to explore that. You see I'm attacking with both. I've got the tactical advantage. Again, applying first strike at this point in time wouldn't have worked because first strike ability wouldn't create a big enough creature to kill the flyer. So as expected, we have another flyer to contend with. We're still at this point on a decent life total, but the problem is we're going to be taking 4 damage a turn that we can't really defend against currently. I don't have access to any tactical advantage, so if I attacked I would just lose the creature, so I hold it back. But as you'll see, although he's going to attack with a 4-4, he has another 4-4, so the Moorland Inquisitor is stuck pretty much now, not being able to do anything. It's not powerful enough to take out. So all I can do is continue to, I keep playing lands to give me access. I now have the Ceratops, which is itself has got double strike, so it attacks twice, and it's got double strike also means it's dealing that damage first. But again, 3 power attacking with first strike is not enough to kill a 4-4. The double strike would. So again, you see the strategy here of the blue deck. It's relying, now it does have ground creatures, as you can see, the Coral Merfolk is a ground creature, but it's primarily relying on 2 strategies which are common for blue, which are flyers and card draw. So it's drawing into a lot of cards, which allows it to keep playing spells, and more often than not, spells that could end up being flyers that give us a problem. Now I know I have access to the spell that we saw before in the first episode, Bond of Discipline, to tap things down, but of course again it's the timing of when that makes sense. What I do here is to attack with the 3-3, given that both the area elementals have attacked. And because it's got double strike, you can see it attacks once, attacks twice. But because I hadn't cast Bond of Discipline, it didn't have life gain. So again, in playing through this challenge, and that is looking at all the tools you have available. So I have these first striking creatures. You can see the first strike symbol. And then remember, that's an activated ability. That's coming from the fact the Ceratops, I think, the Ceratops creature gives all of our, when it's attacking, gives all of our creatures first strike. So you can see, because the attack sequence is over, the first strike ability is lost. The creatures are now back to normal, although I can use mana to create first strikers for the Moorland Inquisitor. But again, the opponent's strategy with drawing into cards is drawing into more cards. The Cloud Concealer as well has an ETB. Remember this, enter the battlefield effect that allows it to draw more cards. So it's a powerful spell. It's a 2-1 flyer. It's not that powerful power wise, but because it draws into extra cards, it can be quite a good card, and it's certainly a key card in this deck that we're facing, giving blue card advantage to draw into spells that help them win the game. So again, we get a tutorial tip on the first strike ability explaining that. So this is like one strategy to learn as part of your learning experience from Magic the Gathering, that potentially having first striking creatures that are big enough can be a useful tool to combat creatures that have flying, assuming you're able to attack and using the first strike ability to either make blocking difficult or making the opponent lose their creature in having to block to avoid the damage. So here I start again. So we're starting off with a similar start. We have both the Inquisitors. I'm drawing into the mana. I've drawn 2 tactical advantages. Now I want to think about using these differently. So you'll see this time I attack. Again, I use a similar strategy at this point in time. I could have given it first strike. I'm holding the other tactical advantage back. There's no point in using it. Not being blocked by anything currently anyway. So again, our start is okay. Our issue becomes when the opponent, this is a feature I understand, you might play decks where you can have what's called a good start. You've got some cheap creatures coming out, dealing damage, which is handy. But if your opponent's sitting back, it may be that he's waiting for enough mana so that he's in a position. So again, here I'm trying to use a strategy. Now this strategy is still not successful in this particular match. The main reason being is just because, despite the fact I'm able to remove the creature, remove the threat temporarily, he just keeps drawing into more and more flyers. And in effect, what happens is I run out of answers. At this point in time, I don't really have an answer. I've got my Ceratops potentially coming out, but it's 7 mana, so you can see it's a powerful card, but we need to be patient to get to the point in time where we're able to use it. Meantime, we're facing 2 4/4 flyers doing 8 damage a turn. Again, our creatures in general don't have haste, so although the Ceratops can come out with first strike, again, as a blocker, it can be powerful as a blocker. It's not doing us any good when we're facing flying creatures. Here again we have the Bond of Discipline, which taps down, but the creature's already attacked, so it's a bit redundant and irrelevant. It would give us lifelink, of course. Creatures you control gain lifelink casting that spell, but at this point in time it's probably not going to save us because we're on 8 life. We're not able to, certainly this time, if I had cast a Bond of Discipline, that would have given lifelink. I could have attacked to give us some life. But you see here my sequencing is a little bit off. I'm casting it now, but it's a bit late because we don't. You can see lifelink coming from the spell. I try to attack using that strategy, but I think the sequencing here was wrong. Again, this card drawing spells. We no longer have lifelink. We've got first strike from the Ceratops, but we don't have lifelink. So despite the fact that attack did damage to him, I'm pretty sure we still lose this. I think it's the next match where I eventually work out the right strategy. And in particular here, this is what happens in Magic. You give your opponent enough time, they can draw into spells like this Windstorm Drake that pumps their creatures. So this particular color challenge is proving a challenge, as you can see. So we'll go on to see the strategy I use next to see if we achieve the win. I think it is this next match where I eventually beat. And then, interestingly enough, the subsequent matches are fairly one-sided. But again, that can happen in Magic. But as I say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If you're winning matches easily, particularly as a free-to-play player that's earning you gold, that's a good thing. And we'll talk about ways to build decks that might allow you to do that more consistently. But you're hopefully starting to get some idea of some of the strategies just purely by playing the game. And I think the best way, the two best pieces of advice I can give you, particularly when you're new to Magic the Gathering, is just keep playing the game, read the cards, understand what they're doing, play through these tutorial quests. You can replay my videos to get my comments. There are obviously a lot of other good providers of Magic the Gathering content that are much more advanced and knowledgeable than I am, but I say my particular take on the series is particularly focusing on my strategies for playing in a free-to-play account in a way that allows me to maximize the best advantage of the game, getting the best collection together without having to spend money in the game, particularly in these days when money can become short for a lot of people with what's happening with the world with the COVID pandemic. It's been difficult for a lot of people working in certain industry types, particularly hospitality, where they've either not been able to earn revenue or they're not in as much as they would normally be able to earn. So for a lot of us, a distraction, how we've been spending time during lockdown, so to speak, game playing has been one outlet for a lot of people to keep them mind off it, just keep them active, keep them enjoying, trying to forget about the trouble the world's in at the minute. And what better way than sign up for this new interesting game. Again, if you're interested in a lot of the things that the game revolves around, which is like fantasy themes, magic spells, a sort of Harry Potter type thing, it might be something that appeals. As a Harry Potter obviously has a very big following. A lot of people enjoy the franchise, enjoy that sort of universe idea of spells. Magic the Gathering puts you in a card game that lets you react as if you're this powerful spellcaster and what spells you're casting. So it's always been very popular since it was first invented back in alpha. And again, make reference in my intro video. I have links there to the sets, so you can look at those links and learn about the history of the first sets, how far back they go, how they developed, right up to the modern day set with Strixhaven, which is the set I've decided to create this new account for. Hence the name that I named the account, SD Squider Dragon, FTP for free to play, and STX is the 3-letter acronym for Strixhaven. All the sets in Magic the Gathering, you'll see if you make reference to, I think apart from some of the early sets that don't, but most of the modern sets, and certainly the sets that you will be playing with Strixhaven and in the future if you continue to enjoy Magic. So again, still trying to battle through this Blue Mage. I'm fairly sure it's the next. Looking at the timer, So 44 minutes played. This is the other thing. One of the other things, a discussion, conversation I want to have with you is how much time do I need to spend? Now, typically, I would argue when we get into discussing the strategies of playing that typically if you can devote probably an hour, sometimes it'll be a little bit more than that, but an hour a day should be enough for you to continue to play, enjoy. You can play obviously much more than that, but in terms of maximizing your time, because time, as we said, is money these days, so that's why I want to focus on the free-to-play experience. It's not going to cost you any money, it'll just cost you your time. But in essence, and we can talk about this in later episodes, but typically an hour a day should be enough for you to maximize the advantage of playing free to play and making sure you're making the right progress. Typically, between 1 to 2 days should be enough. It'll depend, and we'll get into that. But 1 to 2 days should be enough to earn you at least one pack of cards. So you're thinking of a rate about, in some cases, you can earn multiple packs in a single day, which is good. But on average, it's probably a day and a half to 2 days to earn packs of Magic. And as I said, when we get into, once we're through the colour challenges, but even leading up to that, where colour challenges is giving us access to earn decks as well, packs of cards from playing the cards. We want to get to the point in time when we've unlocked all 5 decks that just gives us the tools effectively we need. But in doing that as well, we will be earning the ability to earn cards at the same time. And as I said, even when I had this episode that I'll show you at the end, as well as earning our level 2 reward for a pack, we also earned enough gold by playing through just this quest to buy our first pack, which I don't do at the end of this exercise. We'll do that in the next exercise, but I'll make the point at the end of the video and show you that we have enough gold to buy a pack. Golds packs in Magic the Gathering, what they call booster packs, have been since the game was launched, and I don't think it'll ever change. Have always been set at a price of 1,000 gold per pack. So once you earn 1,000 gold in game, you have earned enough money to go to the store and buy a pack of Magic. And remember, our focus is on playing free to play Magic. So at this point in time, I'm going to start to use this trick with the tactical advantage. So I first of all give my creature, rather than losing it in the exchange, I'm giving it first strike. You see we get the block before, but unlike last time when I lost the creature, because it's first strike, my tactical advantage now kills the flyer and I keep the creature because I've activated the first strike ability. Again, to keep my life total high, I do decide to block here. Again, I need to look back. Maybe I could have had first striking that and then I would have kept that, but first striking requires you to put mana, and potentially was I didn't have enough mana to also give the creature first strike. All I wanted to do is to just prevent the 2 damage. With every point of damage, as we've seen with this deck, particularly if he draws into these spells that pump his flyers up, every point of damage might be critical. We now have our 3/3 out. I'm activating the ability again. So at least when I attack with it now, if the Merfolk wants to block it, I don't lose the Inquisitor, and he doesn't. He holds it back. You see our opponent now still drawing into cards. He's now drawing into these flyers that at least they can act as blockers. Our 3/3 first striker can take it out, but also so can our Inquisitor if we pump the Inquisitor up enough. But in this case, I'm using the bond to tap all the creatures down. It gives our lifelink, and it's enough to finish the job. So you can see there, I can see what the cards were doing, but it's finding the right strategy. It's a combination of using the first strike, the tactical advantages, and the bond timing at the right time to finally get past that quest and defeat the blue mage. We now move on to the next one. I say these next two were relatively quick, but again, might not always be. We'll see different colour challenges, depends on the card you get. So we're now facing green. So as I say, typically these colour challenges, whatever colour deck that you're drawing, you're going to be facing all the other colours that are not the colour of your deck, if that makes sense. I think there's a mirror as well, so I think our last match is against a white deck, so you tend to also face. So again, we have a new creature, the Fencing Ace, which is again, it's got actually, it's double strike. So first strike is where a creature attacks. Double strike means not only does this creature have first strike, but it attacks twice. So double strike and a 1/1. So I'm now working out 1 damage, of course, or even 2 damage if I'm attacking twice isn't enough to remove these 1/6. I'm still attacking, by the way, because you'll see I use tactical advantage. And I have 2 of them, so I'm using tactical advantage on the basis that I have. Remember, the double strike means I'll attack once and then I'll attack twice. And using the tactical advantage gave me enough. Now the green mage brings out a much bigger creature. Fortunately, we have cards in our deck, Pacifism, which is an enchantment, which stops that creature from both attacking and blocking. Meanwhile, we continue with the double attack, seeing there's no creatures defending now. Again, there's a creature cast out. Now you'll notice this creature has hexproof, so that means I'm unable to cast the Pacifism like I did before. But I know with the tactical advantage, the double strike would take, and double strike isn't hexproof, just stops me casting spells, and it doesn't prevent me casting spells on my side. So you can see here I can cast a double strike, and again we don't lose the Fencing Ace because of this double strike. So the first strike kills the creature and it goes on to deal damage to the opponent. So again, talking about colours of mana, what we're seeing here with what's typical for green, green likes casting big creatures. Typically green has spells to ramp up to that, meaning that it has spells to accelerate its mana. A way of getting mana are creatures that actually can generate mana, and the principle there from a green point of view is because it as bigger creatures, it's allowing them to get to cast those bigger creatures much earlier in the game. But as you can see here, we've used white, the key ones here, particularly the pacifism, that there was no protection for the Gigantosauruses that were doing 10 damage each time they attack. And this allowed us to, so again, situational cards, we had the right tools effectively, and we also had to work out, because we had first strike, how we could use that in combination with the tactical advantage. Again, we new additions to the deck, similar cards that we've seen before, but they're all along the same theme for this white deck. There's a good thing about playing this as well. We're getting much more used to that white deck. So again, when we play through all the color challenges, being familiar with playing different colors of decks, and this will come on to when we look at the quests that you get, will ask you to play specific colors. So we know we're going to have access to each of the basic colors once we go through all the color challenges. But again, I'll explain my strategies when the time comes of how best to approach these quests in terms of what decks that you're facing. And to give you a sort of a summary of that in advance, what I'd say is that where you're facing quests, which quite often be two color quests, the best strategy I've found is to only pick one color, because at the end of the day, two color decks, as we'll find out as we go through this journey, two color decks can suffer from one issue, which is having the right mana at the right time. I.e., if you're running more than one color of mana, and we know how mana works to cast spells, if you haven't got the right colored mana of spell, then clearly it's going to be a problem casting spells. You really do not have that problem if you stick to monocolored decks. So quite often where a quest might say there's a two color quest, and we'll look at that, you can take one of those colors and use your best deck for that color, if that makes sense. And that's a strategy I've used very productively throughout my free-to-play Magic experience. I've found particular decks, I've built color decks, monocolor decks that are good for quests, that meet the objectives, and we'll get into that discussion later on when it makes more sense when we're facing that type of quest. I'll show you how to build decks that are more suitable for certain types of quests, which we'll come on to. Yes, this is this is our final match against Shadow 208. So Shadow 208, as you can see, it's not one of the Planeswalker cards. So this is this is our first live match against another player. And I thought it was a mirror match, but as you can see here, the opponent we're playing is playing a blue deck. The good thing is we are familiar with the blue deck, so we can see he's casting flyers in the main, which is a feature of blue, as I mentioned. We again have got ground creatures, but now we have this Charmed Stay, which is also a lifelinking creature that we have flying on. So that's going to keep our life total high. So this, we'll see coming up to the color challenge is not something you see with there's another feature of blue on summons common cards. The blue likes to work on what's tempo. Tempo means setting the opponent back, so you know their turn becomes less effective. So that's a good feature there with using the unsummon card, because in effect by using unsummon he set me back. The mana I put in to cast those spells was returned back to hand. So I don't lose the creature, but and you can see here the opponent's play, because this Windrake, and you see I use the tricks we've learned previously, the tactical advantage. That was a mistake from our opponent, because with the tactical advantage, that creature was pumping his creatures up, giving them extra power. And now, of course, because we've killed it, he's lost that. Our opponent sticks with his strategy of having flyers, obviously, which currently, because we've lost the flyer we did have, but you know, for good benefit. When it was put back to our hand, strategy from the opponent. We've got Bond of Discipline, we know what that looks like, and I say Confront the Assault is also a spell. We don't have the mana for it yet, but we know that can create blockers for us that are flying when we're going to need it. Meantime, we have to navigate and continue our own attacks. Our cat has got lifelink, keeps our life total high. I do decide, because if it's blocked, it gets rid of one of the flyers. Life totals are currently even, 15-15. And if he doesn't block it, I'm gaining 1 life. So he's blocking the priest. It was a mistake for me here in some ways. Yeah, because what I planned to do to keep the life total up was to cast it, but of course I can't cast it in the cat because it's not being blocked. So tactical advantage only works if creatures being blocked or blocking or being blocked. So arguably I should have held that back, because my 3/3 wasn't going to die to the 2/1. He could have had a spell, of course. So this is a bit of a mistake for me as play, because the priest was always going to be saved, and now I've thrown away a tactical advantage because how powerful that is. So, as I'll make the point, I'm a casual player, so I don't always necessarily play and I will definitely make mistakes. But as I said, I'm a free-to-play casual player, and hopefully for viewers that are watching, if you're more serious about your Magic, you're probably following different content creators. I got have a specific objective with this particular account, as I mentioned in the intro, to go back to the very beginning. What is Magic the Gathering like? I've played Magic Arena now since it launched, as I mentioned before. I got into Magic Arena when they first were developing the game. They had lots of closed beta, so they invited players that had been playing previously in a previous product, Magic Duels, which some of you can look up. Magic Duels was a similar digital product, and Magic's Wizards of the Coast example of trying to encourage people to play the game. It's designed more as a marketing thing in reality, because it allowed you to showcase the cards, but over time they replaced that with Magic the Gathering Arena, which is a full authentic, and of course it's now played by professional Magic players in tournaments. And again, coming back to my aim of creating a series, is trying to show you strategies or share a journey on you of what does an early player look like. For players that are already playing the game with these new sets coming out, they already know how to play the game well and they know where to go to get good content. So you can see here, our first player gave us a good game, saying that despite the mistake that we made, we were able to play well enough to complete the quest and complete the colour challenge. Now, one of the things that colour challenge unlock did is give us full access to the deck, which I go on to show you towards the end. So we've now got this Keep the Peace, which is the name of the deck. You can see here, this award of Strixhaven is coming from the experience points because I haven't purchased it. We'll also pick up three new free packs, but I'm going to do that probably in the next video when we do the pack opening. So it's important, just a piece of information for you. When Wizards of the Coast come up with these new sets, Strixhaven, as we've seen, they offer a code to give you free packs. This here I'm trying to show you, typically you see the number of cards that you typically get and the mix of cards you get. You'll always get one mythic rare, the most powerful cards. It'll be one or other of those. Obviously if you get a mythic, that's good news because they tend to be the most powerful magic cards. You'll see that you have wild cards. So again, we'll come on to that in terms of deck building. I'd encourage you to hold on to those. I wouldn't be in a hurry, certainly for a good while, until you get used to the types of decks or the types of cards that you want to play with. There's no rush really. My objective with a free-to-play experience is to really try to get you to build decks based on packs that you open for free and save the wild cards. You've seen the decks that you start with. Here you can see the avatars. I'm just showing you the profile, the different sort of like options in the game. We only have access to this one profile. I think these other avatars will get locked when we do the colour challenges, because we've seen the planeswalkers for those. So currently we are stuck with our white avatar, and you can see I now have this deck is open. The others are locked because we haven't done the colour challenges, but I have this deck open, and this gives you the first look at the deck builder. So here you can see the deck is made up of 60 cards. We've got a name for the deck, Keep the Peace. So you can give your own names to decks. You can be creative for that if you want to come up with clever names for the decks that you're building, based on either the creatures or the colours or combinations. So this gets us to look at, and the idea of having additional cards is, in some cases with your collection, you will have other cards. For example, we have opened, with the pack that we've just opened, a white card. That might be a card that we want to use in this deck, if it makes sense. So when you open packs, the other thing to think about is what of these existing starting decks do the cards make sense in to make them better. So you can be, as you open packs, as well as playing the colour challenge, which gives you access and opens new cards for your deck. When you open packs, you can look at the colours of magic that you're opening and see what might be suitable in the deck. And we'll get into that more. We'll do a bit of deck building. We'll look at doing that at the appropriate time. But for now, for the next few episodes, we're just going to be continuing to do the colour challenge unlocks, and I can share a bit more insight to some of the, we've already seen that with these matches, but some of the features of the how normal colours of decks, the colours of magic are used. So, you know, we saw that with, we're very much used now about the life gain theme of the white deck. You'll see as well, you get these intros. Sometimes when magic issue cards, they become too powerful, so they get to a banned state. which means you take them out, they're no longer able to use in active matches. Normally you can use like ban cards, but there are some cards that you can't use in particular modes just to keep the balance of the game and keep it fair. So you can see here I've got a quest, which we're not running yet, but of course it's blue or green, and we don't really have a blue or green deck yet, so we'll come on to that. We're going to try and re-roll that to see if we get another colour challenge. You can see here, if I make a win there, I would earn 100 gold. If you look at the top there, you can see I've got currently 1500 gold, and this is just because we've been playing. Packs cost 1000 gold each, so we have enough gold for one pack, which I'm not spending now, but we'll use. So it's just some tips as well. You're going to continue to get tips from the tutorials going through the colour challenges about, particularly when it goes into different modes. So you can see the colour challenge, and you see the white has been filled in because we've completed the white colour challenge. So we will get to the other challenges and lock the rest of these decks over the coming weeks. Thank you for watching so far. Hope you're enjoying the series. Make sure you get your account. As I say, give yourself, assign about an hour of your day. You can take longer. You might want to spend longer because if you enjoy playing the game. But typically from a free-to-play player account, 1 hour should do you. Squider the Dragon, thank you for watching.